Hi guys, here we are back again with chapter 14, trying to get a little centered here so you don't see the orange wall there. Okay, all right, so chapter 14, I'm getting towards the end of the class, end of the course. So we're going to talk about consumer decision making and diffusion of innovation. So essentially, consumer decision making and how it affects diffusion of innovations. And so you're thinking, what is diffusion of innovation? And that's, remember, when we talked about in chapter 9, we also talked about it in Marketing 1, about the adopter categories, about the innovators, the early adopters, the early majority, that kind of thing. And we also talked about it, as I said, you talked about it in Marketing 1 as well. Okay, so there are essentially a couple of different levels of decision making. So not all consumer decision making are the same, and so marketers generally put them into three groups. So at one extreme is extensive problem solving. It usually involves a product that requires a lot of information. It's usually like a new product that you're buying. First time you're buying something. Routinized response behavior usually requires little or no information. It's something that you buy over and over again, or are very brand loyal to. So extensive problem solving might be an example of getting a new car or a washer or a dryer. Limited problem solving, weekly groceries and personal care products. And limited problem solving is sort of in the middle, where new information is often added and the criteria for the evaluation is formed. So it's a little bit based on what we know already. They tend to have little experience with the product when engaging in the extensive problem solving, as opposed to being very familiar with a routine product. So, anyway, so the limited problem solving, might be maybe there's a new brand available or a new type of product or something like that. So you might want to look in a little bit further on that. Okay, again, decision-making model, this was right straight from the book. There's the input, which are the things that we've talked about before. It ties this together, this whole model ties together consumer decision-making and the ideas of consumer decision-making and consumption behavior that we've talked about throughout the book. And it's just the idea of putting everything together. So you'll have the input, which is the marketing mix itself, the product itself, the where you're getting your communication from, your cultural influences, the communication sources, that kind of thing. And then the process itself, we talked about the buying process, need recognition, and then the psychological need recognition, the decisions, that kind of thing, that whole process. And then psychological influences, why you're buying it and what your personality is. And then also learning, learning is this whole idea of what you've learned from previous purchases in with similar product. And then output is when you actually make the decision to purchase something, and that whole process, the actual outcome. Okay, so here we go. Input. Things I just kind of covered, the marketing mix. Again, so in more detail about the social cultural influences, we've talked about all these things, the influence of family, peers, social class, reference groups, culture and subculture. And then communication, that the mechanisms that deliver the marketing mix and the influences to consumers. So it's not necessarily just the information about the product itself, but it's also what society is telling you and what your reference groups are telling you about the product. So, for example, you could look at food nowadays, that there's a lot of cultural influence on food and information influence on food in terms of what's good for us. Sugar, they say sugar is the new tobacco. Salt, is salt good, is salt bad? Ongoing discussion about carbohydrates and fats and that kind of thing. Okay, process or the need recognition. It's really concerned with how consumers make decisions. So when we talk about the psychological field, consists of internal influences, motivation, perception, learning, personality, attitudes that are going to affect decision-making, so the consumer's decision-making process, what they want or need, and their awareness of various product choices, information gathering activities, evaluation of alternatives, that kind of thing. And the other thing, too, is this whole idea of a desired state, need recognition. simply a desire for something new. So actual state is this idea that you actually need something, whereas desired state is that you just aspire to have something. It's this idea too, and we talk about this in Marketing 1, the want versus the need. Okay, and then again, decision, the type of decision, the routine versus the new. Again, things that we buy over and over again or a new purchase. Okay, and then process of pre-purchase search. So pre-purchase search begins when a consumer perceives a need that might be satisfied by the purchase and consumption of a product. Sometimes you recall past purchases, and that provides the consumer with adequate information to make the present choice. But when the consumer has no prior experience, he or she might have to engage in extensive research of the outside environment for useful information in which to base the choice. So this table talks about the different factors that increase pre-purchase information search. Also, a lot of decisions are based on a combination of previous experience from like internal sources and marketing and non-commercial information, which would be external sources. And the degree of perceived risk can also influence the stage of the decision process. In high-risk situations, consumers are likely to engage in complex and extensive information, shopping on the internet, shopping or going on the internet, and evaluation. And in low-risk situations, they're likely to use very simple or limited search evaluation tactics because it's, might not need as much information or whatever it may be. Okay, information search. Contextual factors, when we talk about context, we talk about, what's the situation, what are the other outlying areas. So, just because consumers have limited information processing capacity, people think that just because consumers have limited information processing capacity, they have to develop a choice strategy based on individual factors and contextual factors, so characteristics of the decision tasks. So 3 major contextual factors that have been research that people talk about are task complexity. It's the number of alternatives and amount of information available for each alternative. For example, if you want to buy a new faucet for your kitchen sink, that could, you could be overwhelmed with information and spend lots and lots of time researching it. Information organization is how the information is organized, what the content is. And then time constraints. How much time do you have to decide? Is it something that you can take your time looking at, or is it something that you have to buy, like an emergency, you have to buy it right away? Okay, so you will look at the evaluation of alternative brands. And it's this idea that there's the evoked set or the considered set. It refers to the specific brands or models they're considering and making a purchase within a particular product category. So that's what you're thinking about already. The inept set consists of brands or models that the consumer excludes from purchase. They're not even going to think about because they're unacceptable, because they're seen as inferior. And then an inert set consists of brands or models the consumer is indifferent towards because they're perceived as not having any particular advantages. And so, it depends upon what it is, what you're looking for, and relatively speaking. So maybe, with the evoked set, it might be, it could be brand loyalty, it could be based on price, it could be based on availability, that kind of thing. Okay, so let's look at evaluation of alternatives and attributes. So some product attribute examples might include, size, weight, the flavor, the sweetness, the color of the item, the packaging of it, all that kind of thing. So you might want to think about, buying an e-reader or buying, might be interested in the size, the weight, the battery life, the memory size, compatibility with your cell phone, that kind of thing. Maybe if you're thinking about a food product like orange juice, you're thinking about, how much pulp is in there, or how sweet it is, or, what the flavor is, that kind of thing. If you're thinking about buying a watch, it could be something like, whether it's got an alarm, whether it's water resistant, the size of the dial, whether it's readable, all that kind of thing. So sometimes the advertiser will tell you what what you should be concerned about. So, price is important. Price is less important when the product is right. So an advertisement might recommend a way the criteria the consumer should use and how they should assess it, and we depending upon the people's personality and exposure and all these things we've been talking about, it might influence how they make their decision. Okay, so let's talk about decision rules. How is it that what are the quote unquote rules of decision making? So compensatory decision rules, so decision rules are the procedures that consumers use to facilitate brand choices or other related choices. The rules reduce the burden of making a complex decision by providing guidelines or routines that make the process less taxing. So, things we think about. So compensatory decision rules come into play when a consumer evaluates brand or model options in terms of each attribute that's important to them and computes some sort of score in their head or actually on a piece of paper for each brand. So the assumption is that the consumer is going to select the brand that scores highest. So it's making a list of the pros and the cons kind of a thing. Non-compensatory decision rules don't allow consumers to balance positive evaluations of a brand on one attribute against a negative evaluation on another attribute. So essentially there are 3 different rules that you can, non-compensatory rules. So a conjunctive decision, the consumer establishes a separate minimally acceptable level as a cutoff point for each attribute. Like I won't have a tablet that has less than 8 gigabytes of memory or whatever it is. So and if they fall below that, then they won't buy it. So a lexicographic decision rule is when the consumer ranks the attribute in terms of perceived relevance or importance. So maybe the size of the tablet is important. And then from that, the consumer, the screen or whatever, from that, the consumer compares the various alternatives in terms of one single attribute that's considered most important. And everything else is, they are willing to accept, a color because it's this one attribute of the size or the battery life is important, screen size or battery life. So anyway, then there's this whole idea. So another way you can look at this is in terms of looking at a rationale. We'll continue to talk about the ebook or the tablet. So conjunctive is that you can say you selected the ebook that had no bad features. Disjunctive is I picked the ebook reader that excelled in at least one attribute. And the lexicographic is that I chose the ebook reader that scored the best on the attribute that I considered to be the most important. So it sort of depends upon, relatively speaking, what it is that you're most interested in. Now there's this whole idea of affect referral, that you buy the one that has the best overall rating on it, and so you're looking at a variety of different things. So there you go. There's that same chart that we just went over. Okay, so segmentation by shopping strategy. There are different types of. We've talked about this before. There's different types of shoppers. There's a practical loyalist, and those are who look for ways to save on the brands and products that they would buy anyway. There's the bottom line price shoppers, those who buy the lowest priced item with little or no regard for brand at all. They're just looking for save some money. Opportunistic switchers are those who use coupons or sales to decide among brands and products that fall within their evoked set. The set that remember that's a set that's acceptable to them. And then the deal hunters are those who look for the best bargain and are not brand loyal. So a lot of this has to do with brand loyalty. Also has to do with not only brand loyalty, but loyalty to your own pocketbook, your own wallet. Okay, so how is it that so sometimes you might have missing information, and it might result from advertisements or packaging that mention only certain attributes, or their own imperfect memory of the attributes, or lack of ability to find, lack of access to the information, that kind of thing. So, and some information can only be obtained through actually using the product. So some might delay until information is obtained, or they might ignore missing information and decide to continue with the current decision rule, just using the available information that's there. The consumers also can change the customarily used decision strategy to one that better accommodates the missing information or the situation at hand, or they also might infer or quote unquote construct or make up the missing information just to help them make a decision. Okay, so we're still on that model that we're talking about decision-making output. So essentially there's three different types of outputs: trial, repeat purchase and brand loyalty, and post-purchase evaluation. So in the trial, it's this idea that they actually try the product and for a time and see what it's like. Maybe they use someone else. It's sort of this idea of exploratory phase of purchase. They might test drive a car, or they're interested in buying a car, so they go rent that car to drive it for a little while, see what it's like. So there's this whole idea of also repeat purchase or brand loyalty. And then post-purchase evaluation is what happens, we talk about this in Marketing 1. It happens after the consumer uses the product, and you look at it in context of what their expectations were. So when a product's performance matches the expectations, they feel neutral. Positive confirmation or positive disconfirmation is when the product performs better. And then cognitive dissonance occurs when there's some sort of tension, post-purchase tension, and they try to reassure themselves that they made the right choice. And they might rationalize their decision. They might, seek advertisements that support their decision, and that kind of thing. They rationalize what they're doing. So cognitive dissonance is this idea of post-purchase behavior, also called buyer's remorse. Okay, so, we often buy things. Let me flip here. We're not always buying things for ourselves. We're also often buy things for other people. And it's this idea of gifting behavior. It's a gift exchange that takes place between a giver and a recipient. So it's really broad. It takes gifts that are given voluntarily, so gifts that are obligations, and then also gifts to yourself. So, and you're going to look at things differently. You're going to buy things differently, and you're going to make a decision differently when you're buying something for someone else than when you're buying something for yourself. Or when you're buying something for yourself that's maybe a special treat or out of the ordinary. So there's different types of gifts. Intergroup gifting occurs when one group exchanges gifts with another group, such as one family with another family or one department with another department. Similarly, gifts given to families will be different than those given to individual family members. So you might give, maybe someone who owns a pool, would give them maybe some pool toys or that kind of thing, or games for the pools, or as opposed to an individual, you would give maybe a gift card someplace, an individual in the family. So intercategory gifting is this idea that when either an individual is giving a gift to a group, so a single friend is giving a couple an anniversary gift, or a group is giving an individual a gift, that friends chip in to buy someone a joint birthday gift. So the gift selection strategies, buy for joint recipients or buy with someone, are especially useful when it comes to a difficult recipient situation, when that's difficult when it's difficult it's difficult to some people. They're more difficult to buy for than others. Then intergroup gifting is it's giving it to yourself. That's a group that gives the gift themselves. So a family might take themselves on vacation. They might pass up birthday gifts to go on vacation, for example. Then interpersonal gifting is when you buy something for yourself. So it's when this idea that you thinking about what you might like, and as I said, it's usually a special treat for them or something that's out of the ordinary. And you ask yourself, do you give this person something that they want, something that you want, that they want, or that they need, something that you would like them to have? Gifting is a whole different thing, and certainly during the Christmas season, and also during the holiday season, not just Christmas, but the holiday season, depending upon what you celebrate, or graduation season, you'll see a lot of ads on television that talk about this whole idea of gifting. Okay, so let's move on to this whole idea of diffusion of innovation. It's the idea of acceptance of the innovation, like a new product, new service, that kind of thing takes place among members of a social system or market segments over time. And again, that's what we talked about with the idea with the innovator, the early adopter, that whole group. So essentially, it includes the diffusion of innovation includes 4 elements. The innovation is the new product, model, or service. The channels of communication, whether it be informal or formal, personal or impersonal, group to individual. And then the social system is essentially, what market system are you in? Um, uh, what's the what are the circumstances, the cultural, the social circumstances surrounding it, and the time, how much with time, how much time has passed it, how much time has passed. Okay, moving on. Innovation adoption process. It's the smaller process that focuses on stages through which an individual consumer passes when deciding to accept or reject a new product. So again, make sure that we know that we talk about, society accepting something versus individuals accepting something. It still sort of follows the same general path, but might move at a little different pace. Okay, so types of innovation. There's essentially 3 different types of innovations. Continuous innovation has the least disruptive influence to establish patterns. So essentially, products that are maybe constantly changing. So that you're always expecting a new, newly designed, tablet or MacBook or whatever it may be, or you're always expecting, we're always expecting new brands of M&Ms or cookies or whatever it may be. Dynamically, continuous innovation is a little bit more disruptive than a continuous innovation, but still doesn't alter established behavior patterns. It may involve the creation of a new product or the modification of an existing product. So, for example, MP3 players, USB flash drives, disposable diapers, things that are kind of, constantly, they might not always have a big change, as maybe, not as close together as in the product life cycle, but they are expected. It might make you pause a little bit, but it's not maybe going to really interrupt you. And then discontinuous innovation is when people are required to adopt a new behavior pattern. So, for example, automobiles have changed so much in terms of, the technology that's in them right now. Um, uh, Changes to the, medical products, that kind of thing. So those are things that happen that people really, that gives you pause. Okay, so there are a variety of different factors that are going to influence adoption. One is relative advantage. So what's the degree to which the potential customers perceive a new product as superior to existing products? Is it that much better? Is the chair that moves back and forth in the car that much better than the chair that, doesn't move back as quickly as the other one? Compatibility. So it's the degree to which potential customers feel a new product is consistent with their present needs, or their values and practices, and it also tends to vary across cultures. Complexity, the degree to which the new product is difficult to understand or use. So is it are smart TVs too difficult to use, that kind of thing. People are concerned about that. Trial ability, how easy is it to check out a product, and can you sample it, or before you actually commit to it. And then observability or communicability, how easy is it to share with consumers what the benefit is. Okay, and again, the adoption process. It's the 5 stages through which potential customers pass in attempting to arrive at a decision. Try to, whether they're going to pick a new product or not. Awareness, interest, evaluation, trial, and adoption. Again, things that we talked about in Marketing 1. All right, so that's it on Chapter 14, and we'll see you back here with 15. Thanks.